Yeah, thank you for everybody for coming today. We're very, very excited to have you all here on our second webinar at Resi.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
And before we get started, I have a confession. Home renovation is very, very hard. And we know this because we hear it all the time with our clients. People find it overwhelming because they don't know who to speak to next, or how much it should cost, or who they should trust. And I really hope today Heather and I can bring some clarity and certainty to this whole home renovation process and make it a little bit less overwhelming for you guys. My name is Mark Hood. I am the head of architecture here at Resi. I've been here for 4 or 5 years and been an architect for about 9 years. I have a fantastic team of architects and technologists and designers here at Resi. They're really, really fantastic at what they do. They really are. And I appreciate I've got quite a strong Irish accent. So if you need me to slow down, please let me know.
I can't understand them half the time anyway, don't worry.
Thank you, Heather. And a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. There's a Q&A at the end. So please, if you can put your questions in the Q&A box, that'd be fantastic. And we'll answer any raised hands at the end as well. And we'll have the closed captions to be sent out after for anybody who requires that too.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, again, thank you all for being here. My name's Heather. I'm a project consultant here at Resi, which essentially means that I speak to people about their homes and projects all day. And my goal is to make as many unknowns known at the start of the journey, similar to our aim here today. I've worked at Resi specifically here for a year now, and I've spoken to thousands of people about their projects. Originally, I'm from New Zealand, which means you'll have to put up with 2 accents today. But I think I'm a bit easier to understand than Mark here. And yeah, really excited to kick things off for you all and hopefully provide some clarity on what Mark said can be quite a confusing industry with a lot of jargon and red tape.
Fantastic. And Heather is great and an absolute expert in all things planning and design.
All right, so before we get started, just some context on Resi and who we are. We are the UK's #1 home improvement platform. We operate all over England. Primarily, we are an architectural practice. However, we can provide support for you at really any stage of the journey you're in. We've done over 6,000 projects in the last 7 years. It is a lot, around 120 a month. And yeah, our goal is to enable everyone to have a happy home and to make the home improvement journey not only accessible to the everyday homeowner, but enjoyable and without stress as much as that is possible.
Exactly.
All right, so first off, how do I prepare for my renovation? Where do I start?
Yes, right at the start. And over the past 10 years, people always tell me that I sound like a broken record. I say the same things on repeat, but it's because I really mean it. And these things are so important. And the first one is budget. Budget really is reality. And it's too easy to design over budget and have these fantastic designs. It's much more important and more difficult to design on budget. And my advice for you at home today is think about this early. Think about your contingency. Think about if you have any options. You want to have full visibility on your potential budget as early as possible and communicate that there with your designers. At Resi, we use technology and our experience of thousands of projects to set realistic budgets as early as possible. So whenever you're speaking to Heather and her team in your advice calls, it's quite high level. It speaks about contingencies. It's about the big picture budget. And once you move through to design, it's a bit more detailed about the walls and how much is it actually going to cost. And then once we get you introduced to our contractors, that's whenever it's much more detailed. That's about your glazing and your kitchens and your fancy light switches and your wallpaper. So it's about having the right level of detail at the right time.
Exactly. I hear it all the time in my calls. As you say, it's people's #1 concern, and rightly so. And yeah, my recommendation, always build in a contingency. Things go over budget. It's easy to sell someone the dream. It's a lot harder to design mindful of costs and set correct expectations early on.
Absolutely. And the next thing is location. Location. It's the age-old saying, and my advice here is don't rush this year. So whenever you're starting this home renovation journey and this dream, take a step back. Think about the big picture. What are you going to be doing in 3, 5, 7 years' times? My advice is to think about the transport, think about the schools, think about the amenities, And if this all works, fantastic. You've got a cracking scheme. If it doesn't align, you may be thinking of a different site or a different house. And also, I was born in Northern Ireland, which is in Enniskillen, and it's significantly cheaper to build there than here, as you can imagine. But also within England, it's much cheaper. So London is about 25% more expensive than Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds. So take a think about the potential cost as well. And the next thing is ceiling prices. Ceiling prices is something which not everybody is aware of. It basically is, no matter how much you invest in your house, there will be a limit to the value of your street. So we are currently here now in Brixton, and it will have a lower ceiling price than maybe somewhere in the Cotswolds or Chelsea, but a higher ceiling price than maybe somewhere in Middlesbrough or my home in Enniskillen. So you really need to think about the street value before proceeding. And I know people will be asking me, how on earth do I find out, where do I find the ceiling price for my street? Well, there isn't actually any government location or list.
Nothing official.
There's nothing official, Heather, but my advice to you is go on to Zoopla.com, go on to rightmove.com, and these two property websites are amazing at understanding what your neighbors have done on the street, how much they've extended, and what they've sold it by. So check them out before you start renovating.
All right, number 4, permitted development. So how to know if I have permitted development rights. You may have heard of this scheme in place in the UK called permitted development. And essentially what this is rights that you may have as a homeowner, which allow you to develop on your property as long as your design falls within a certain set of criteria. So for example, if you are a mid-terrace property, you may be able to do a ground floor extension up to 3 meters from the original rear of your property, or a loft conversion with a main dormer, as long as the mass doesn't exceed 40 square meters. There are other requirements as well, but as long as your design meets them and you have permitted development rights in place, then your local authority can't necessarily stop you from doing your build.
Okay, I've got a house and I'm thinking about purchasing and extending. How do I know if I have PD rights?
That's a good question. So some properties automatically have the rights removed, such as like flats, listed buildings, properties in conservation areas. Do some research. In my experience, 9 out of 10 times, if your neighbours have used permitted development rights, the chances are that you have those in place as well. But if you're still unsure, ask us. You can book in for a free advice call at Resi, and myself or one of my colleagues can do the research for you and we'll be able to let you know.
Very interesting.
And yes, finally, planning. So if your project does fall outside of that permitted development scheme, then you will need to submit an application to your local authority for planning permission. And here at Resi, we're lucky we have a dedicated planning team made up of ex-case officers who we lean on during design to give you the best chances of approval. That's why our approval rate is so above the industry average, and we'll go more into detail on the do's and don'ts of planning in a few minutes.
And I actually can't stress enough how great our planning team are. They're ex-case officers who have these really great relationships with councils, and because of that, we're actually so confident in our planning approval rates. In some cases, we will guarantee planning or give you your money back. I know it's quite a punchy thing, so if you're interested in this, give us a call, let us talk you through it, but we do have this planning guarantee because we're so confident in how great our planning team are. Okay, the next thing to think about is, where will you live during construction? And I think this is something which is so important to think about quite early on and not to leave too late. So I guess the principle is, if you stay in your building during construction, it is very, very likely, definitely going to take longer than moving out. So what you really need to think about is, if I move out, how much will that rental accommodation cost for them 3, 4, 5 weeks or 2, 3, 4 months?
Exactly. And if you're in London, good luck getting short-term accommodation on short notice at the moment.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important, because it's hard to get a rental property. But if you stay in, your builder is going to take longer and charge you more. So it really is a balance. And some things to think about on top of this, sort of the financial side, is, first of all, dust. There is literally dust everywhere, in every drawer, in every cupboard, in every coat pocket. So it's really, once you start demolishing walls, there's dust everywhere. The second thing is, if you have young children, I really recommend getting out of there. It's not worth the risk. It adds an extra layer of complexity, which you don't want there. Also, the scope of the project. If this is a big project, like a full house renovation, a loft and a rear extension together, you're most likely going to need to have new pipes, new electrics, new boiler, and it really makes the house uninhabitable. So it really means you have to move out. And the last thing is insurances. Speak to your home insurance, speak to your building insurance, speak to your life insurance. Make sure that everyone is on the same page and you have really real clarity on who is responsible for the insurance. And my advice is speak to your builder early on and they'll give you a really clear indication of that cost balance.
All right, on to the next question. What are the important steps in the timeline that I shouldn't miss? So what does the roadmap look like from the start of your journey through to your completed builds?
I guess how long is a piece of string? It's really hard to say.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There is no guaranteed timeline, really. It could take anywhere from months to years, depending on your project. And some of the things that control timeline are within your control and some are not. So let's take it step by step. Firstly, design. The first thing we need to consider is the design itself. This is where you'll work closely with your architect for the right design for you and managing all the moving parts of things like budget, planning risk, complexity, how you're using the space. The time spent in this phase is heavily down to you, but usually I see my customers here for around 4 to 6 weeks.
Yes, that's about right.
From design, we then move into planning. Once you're ready to make the application to your local authority, we don't have much say over the speed. Planning outcome return times do vary council to council, but on average at the moment we're seeing them come back in about 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah, and just on that there, planners since COVID, they're under immense pressure and the planners get a hard time, but they actually work so hard, but because they're under so much pressure, there is severe delays in there. So there's no way of like fast tracking this. You have to build in these timelines. But it can be longer. So be prepared for that. My one recommendation is get around to your neighbors with a bottle of wine, let them know what's going on before you start. And it removes any risk of this 10 to 12 weeks being longer because your neighbors say, absolutely no, this is the first time I've seen it. I'm not happy. So speak to your neighbors early.
Yeah, always nice to be kept in the loop as well. So next, once planning is approved, the next step is to set yourselves up for a compliant and smooth and on time and on budget build. And we do this by creating what we call building regulation drawings, whereby we build upon the proposed designs to embed and coordinate all of the technical compliance elements of your builds. And it's at this stage of the process where you will need to engage a structural engineer. You also may need to coordinate your party wall surveyor and notices if you're working near or on a party wall boundary. That's when you'll have to issue the notice to your neighbours. Neighbours can't reasonably stop you from proceeding with your project, but they can make things very difficult.
Yeah, and again, planning, party wall, it's the same thing. Get your neighbours on board, bottle of wine, shepherd's pie, whatever you need to do. They need to feel like they're part of this here, or else it can be quite difficult.
Definitely. All right, and then finally, it is, coordination of these, from the timeline perspective, coordination of these third parties that takes around 4 to 6 weeks, but can be longer if complications do arise. But it is really important to do this part of the project properly, because it's here that is crucial for giving you control over the build itself. Because the next step is to use these building regulation drawings to gain tenders for the work itself.
Yeah, and absolutely, Heather. And I guess these technical drawings or the building regs drawings are so important because it locks in the quality and the specification early, and it helps people go to tender with a set of detailed drawings as opposed to a set of planning drawings, which it opens up risks. And we have seen scare stories of people going to site with planning drawings and coming back to us and they're like, this is delayed, or this isn't what I expected, because they don't
clashes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So lock it. It's so important to have these details locked in. Thank you very much for that there, Heather. And next is, it's how long will the build take? And it really is hard to say, and every project is different. But there are some things to sort of help you think about how long this may take. And again, neighbors, keep them on side. We keep saying this here because it is so important, but also things outside of your control are the weather. If you're building in December, January, and the temperature goes below, I think about 2 degrees, you can't actually pour concrete. You can't build walls. So a summer build can potentially be 1-2 months quicker than a winter build, purely because of the weather, which is sometimes you can't change that because you need to build quickly, but it's something to think about. And another thing which is quite interesting is a lot of our customers live in these really lovely, really fantastic terraced houses. But because of the terraced housing, there's no access to the rear garden. So every wheelbarrow, every steel, every piece of glazing, every piece of mud has to go through your front door, through the hallway, down into the back. So unfortunately, again, you can't control this, but if you do live in a terraced house and there's no direct access to the rear garden, it's looking like 2, 3, 4 weeks extra to the build timeline. And lofts, typically resi lofts take about 6 to 10 weeks to build. Side returns, rear extensions, a bit longer, 10 to 16 weeks. And yeah, speak to our builders and they're really happy with them timelines.
And surely it also then takes time to get the contractors on site.
Absolutely right, Heather. So from you signing a contract to get it on the site, it can be 3, 4, 5 weeks. And that's the mobilization period. And basically that's your builder moving men or women from this site to this site and getting supplies ready and getting their diggers ready and getting everything else ready. So yeah, it's not usually a go as soon as you sign a contract. All right, next up is how can I find and vet trustworthy builders?
Can't underplay how important this part is.
We hear it all the time. These builders will be in your house, your family home while you go to work. So it's so important to trust them. And first up is accreditation. And you'll probably be surprised to know that anybody can be a builder. I can be a builder, Heather can be a builder. It's kind of just the same. There's no sort of protections around the title. So because of this, we always recommend to our clients to look for some additional accreditation. At Resi, we work with 2 particular companies, Trustmark, who are a fantastic government-supported organization, and it's not for profit, and it removes risk. If they have that stamp on their tenders, or if they have that stamp on their website, it really reduces that risk. And the second one is the Federation of Master Builders, even better again. This is builders pay for this service, but it means they have to deliver to a set of standards. They have to be financially astute. They have to be in a much better place as a company. So again, if you get a tender and you see that FMB logo, or on the website, you see the FMB logo, it really is fantastic. The next thing is awards. If you're looking to build in Leeds, Camden, London, Croydon, and you see the best builder in Croydon 2022, my goodness, it's a humdinger, it's fantastic. It means you probably will have to pay a bit of a premium, but these awards, if independent, are really good indication of a good quality builder. The next thing is availability. Quite interesting one, that we spoke previously about mobilization. It does take time to start your build. And if it is a bit quicker, if your builder tells you they can start in 1 day, 1 week, it is a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, in my experience working with our Connect team, good quality contractors are booked out quite far in advance. So always good to start the conversation early, right?
100%. And that's why we typically see 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for that mobilization period. 0 to 1 weeks, a bit of a red flag, but it could be fine. And because it just means you need to do an additional level of referencing or checking. And referencing, we always say, get 3 references. I think at Resi we do 4, which is even more. And obviously, and with the references, I always recommend lift the phone, speak to these clients. If you can get to site, unbelievable. You can walk around with the client. Recently completed in the last 1 to 2 years, our building, it's underway. These things are really important to sort of help you lock in that quality.
Absolutely.
And the last thing is 2 more things here with builders. Insurances. Really make sure that the builder's insurance is up to date for the specific year. There's a risk here. There's a risk of a member of the public getting onto your site and there's an accident. So it's so important to make sure your builder's insurance is in up to date and covering the price of your build, but also your home insurance. Make sure your home insurance are fully aware of everything. That's the drawings, the details, the technical information.
Exactly. Cannot stress how important it is to make sure that you're protected from an insurance perspective.
Exactly. 100. And we've seen this so many times. That's why we stress this thing so passionately. And the last thing is payment plans. And I literally can't stress this enough. Never pay everything up front. Again, we've heard scare stories. So it's not even paying everything up front. It's if you have only completed 20% of the works and you paid for 90% of the payments, there's so much risk there. So my advice is before you start the build, make sure you have a payment plan set up and in a contract. And that can be, I'm going to pay you Mr. or Mrs. X every 2 weeks. 2 weeks is X amount of money. Or I'm going to pay you when the foundations are in, when the walls are up, when the roof's up, when the glazing's in. And all of a sudden, this structure will add so much more, it'll give you so much more confidence to the whole payment structure. And it means you're not paying too much too quickly.
Absolutely. Lots of things to think about there.
Yeah, a lot of detail.
With the build, yeah. All right. So next on to question 4. Why do planning applications get rejected and how do I get mine approved?
Yes. And I think there's things here for us to do to try and make the councils look at us more favorably. Exactly.
Yes. Planning can be a daunting process, but making sure the project is lawful is absolutely a necessity.
Absolutely.
And the strategy that we approach planning with is going to be dependent on your project and on your design. So what are the things that we can do to manage risk here? Number 1, look at the precedents in your area. So what your authority permits for one homeowner, they have little grounds to refuse for someone else, for you. And each local authority has a planning portal with all the information on approvals and refusals there that we can take advantage of during design to understand where that line is. Number 2 is hire an architect. Let us help you. Again, at Resi, we've worked on thousands of projects. We're liaising with the authorities every single day.
They love us.
They love us. Often as well, refusals can be avoided where design is of a higher quality. And there's a reason our approval rate here is so above the industry average.
Yeah.
And thirdly, listen to your case officer most of the time. As said, we keep that line of communication open for feedback during planning and can sometimes make alterations to the designs in that process to increase chances of approval first time round.
Yeah, and I think planning is like one of the things you just have to do. Everything else, there's options, there's different ways around it. Planning, you have to do it. So it's important to really think about it and understand the magnitude of the importance.
Precisely. But sometimes it does go wrong, doesn't it, Mark?
Yes, absolutely. And sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but refusals do happen. It's a matter of life. It's like taxes and death. Refusals are there. But I'm so happy with our in-house planning team that they're invaluable. They're literally ex-case officers. So they have been in the council sitting there leading teams. And now they've helped us have approval rates, which are on average over 91%, but in some months it's like 96%. And if you follow our advice, it's closer to 100%. And when you compare that to the industry average of 80% across Greater London, it really is stark how great these planners and the impression they're having on our team. And some things to do to try and avoid refusal, which we will discuss with you in the call, are think of the character of the street. So you've got the rhythm of the street, these lovely houses or these typical flats. If your extension is breaking that up, if it's looking a bit awkward, immediately you're breaking up the character of the street, and planners are like, red flag. The next thing is overshadowing. Is your extension blocking the window into your neighbor's kitchen where they eat their breakfast every morning? It's these small things the planners think about. And can your neighbor no longer see the sky because we have this huge extension to the rear? Or does this extension look so big that it makes the house look smaller? So it's a real balance of overlooking and size and character. And these are the things we want to nail really, really early to help you maintain this high approval rate at Resi.
Exactly. And again, when it comes to planning, speak to us. If your project does fall within our planning guarantee, we can provide you with just a bit of safety there that, yeah, we can be confident that we'll get you through.
Absolutely.
All right, question 5, how can I get a realistic budget estimate upfront? So yeah, I have spoken to thousands of people about their home improvement projects, and by far the biggest concern I hear about is budget.
I genuinely, I couldn't agree more. Budget is just, it's reality. It means everything.
It is reality. And as an architectural practice, we don't control the market, but what we do control is the design. And that is what is going to dictate the cost at the end of the day. And when considering budget early on, it's important that what you want to invest and what the project may realistically cost are in the same ballpark. Because before you have any detailed drawings, no one can actually accurately tell you what a build is going to cost. There are just too many unknowns. But these are the things that we can consider. Number one, when are you locking in your design? Again, design dictates costs always at the end of the day. What is the complexity there? How much mass are you adding? What materials are you using, etc.
I think with my advice to clients with design is lock it in early. If there's anybody who you needs to get eyes on this, like your granny, your grandpa, your neighbor, your architect you met 50 years ago, get their eyes on this early and get it signed off at the design stage, because any changes after planning or on site to the design potentially could cost you more money with additional consultants or more materials on site. So just get it done early. It's so important.
Secondly, are there any party wall matters? Again, we touched on this briefly before. Party wall can become complicated.
It really is. And Heather and I have spoken with this quite a lot over the last few weeks. And party wall matters, they can be this like really manageable, quick thing which doesn't cost a lot, or it can be this big thing which can run out of control. And it's all about, let's say you live in a terraced house again with a maisonette, so a flat below you and you're on the top floor, and the works you're doing, it might impact four flats or 4 houses. Each one of these houses has the right to appoint their own party wall surveyor, and you will pay for it. So let me say it again, because you're instigating the works, each one of these 4 or 5 flats who is impacted by the works has the right to appoint a party wall surveyor, and you will pay for it. So this can go from 1 surveyor to 5 very quickly. So my advice to you on this is, before they get a letter from the planners or before they get a letter from anybody else, get round there, let them feel comfortable with the design. But also the second thing is, your responsibility at home is to make sure they are happy with your party wall surveyor, not their own. Because all of a sudden, if you have 5 flats who all have 1 party wall surveyor, which is yours, you pay for 1. But if they have their 5 party wall surveyors, you pay for 5. And it becomes a scary cost.
It does. Again, when we said earlier that we might sound like a broken record,
yeah,
we weren't kidding. Speak to your neighbors, get people on your side.
Shepherd's pie, bottle of wine. It's perfect.
All right. Number 3, are you paying VAT? Is this included in the tenders from your contractors?
Yeah.
What is the build cost versus the fixtures and fittings as a fourth? Fixtures and fittings comes into a huge spec. If you're putting in a new kitchen, you can spend a few £1,000s on something flat pack, or you can go bespoke design for £50,000 if you want to. And then finally, quality versus cost at the end of the day. Where are we sacrificing the two and finding the balance?
I always say good design doesn't need to cost a lot. So that 10 grand kitchen can look just as good as your 55 grand kitchen.
Absolutely.
Okay, again, the bearer of bad news, what not to do. Just some things to think about. First of all, don't approach and appoint your builders too early. So you can speak to them, but you want to make sure they're tendering on detailed drawings, and that really will protect you and your tender. So line them up, speak to us about them, but don't engage in prices until you have the detailed building regulations or technical design pack.
Yeah, I know it can be really tempting to speak to contractors early on and get those numbers, but anything anyone says to you around budget before you have drawings, take with a grain of salt. It is always estimations, guesstimations.
Absolutely. And again, I really don't want people to ever have a bad payment plan. So we touched on this before, but first of all, get your payment plan set up every 2 weeks, every week, whenever a huge milestone in the building happens. and then get it into a contract. Literally get it into a JCT contract or something which is written and agreed and signed, so it really protects you. And again, on the insurance, do your research here. Life insurance, home insurance, structural warranties. Speak to us if this is quite detailed information, because we can guide you. But insurances are so important to making sure you're de-risked here. And also, don't forget to think about the value of your home. This is a well above my head, but you're actually making your home more valuable. You're increasing the value. So there's conversations there to have with your remortgaging, your mortgage advisor, to give you a bit more guidance on the potential future value of your home when you remortgage.
Exactly. And yeah, now moving into the question 6, how do we actually calculate the value that an extension would add to your property? And this is variable. If you are designing your forever home, return on investment may not be a factor for you, but for a lot of people, they want to make sure that they are not overcapitalizing on their property. And this is where we need to consider both the best design for you and your family who's going to be using the property, but also future-proofing for how someone else may be using the home one day.
Absolutely. And I always say, before you start designing, before you lock anything in, like, speak to your estate agents about the potential here and the potential value adds. And there's 4 things we want to speak about today, which can add real value to your home design. The first one is open plan living. It's this thing which has sort of taken a bit of momentum over the last 10 years, and it is amazing. People love it. People love the kitchen, living, dining, having this free flowing space. And they love it for practical reasons as well as how it looks. It's like, if I'm the mom or dad in the kitchen sink, washing the dishes or cooking the dinner, I can see the kids in the living room. I can see the kids doing the homework, and it adds a bit of security to the whole process.
Exactly. You can keep an eye on things, but also just spend time together as a family. It's probably the most popular option that I speak to people about these days. 100%.
Knock down them walls and open it all up. The next thing is the garden room. And in this is more recent. This is in this work from home era. Lets you get close to green space, lets you leave the kids in the house and do your 9 to 5 in this outdoor space. People use it for yoga studios, for studies, for gyms, for anything. And we now hear this all the time on the phones, and it will become a value add for the money you put into this here to what you'll get out of it for that extra flexible space.
Yeah, very flexible as well, because it can specifically be used as a multi-purpose space. You can use it as anything, as an office, but the next potential owner could see it as a gym, guest room, as you said.
Exactly, so flexible. The next thing is your kitchen. And again, kitchens, they can cost a lot of money, or you can be a bit more thrifty. And I've seen clients and friends who have upgraded their kitchens for less than £1,000 by focusing only on the kitchen cupboard doors and the knobs. All of a sudden, this maybe a bit of a dated kitchen looks much smarter, because you've done this simple intervention by upgrading the cupboards and the doors instead of spending 10 grand on a brand new kitchen.
Exactly. You can really elevate things in the details.
Well, 100%. And the last thing is bathrooms. And bathrooms, there's 2 points for me. First of all, if you have a 2 or 3 or 4 bedroom house with a really great master bedroom, honestly, it needs to have a really good ensuite. People looking around these houses, they want this private space, this private secure space, which is just theirs, just that couple of space attached to the master bedroom. So think about that. And the second thing is, it's quite personal. My grandparents, they live in Belfast in Northern Ireland, 85, 86 respectively. They're in cracking shape, but they live in a 2-story house. And on the ground floor, there's no bathroom, there's no shower, there's no sink. And every single day when I call into them on the way back from the airport, I see them walk up the stairs to brush their teeth, to use the loo, to wash their hands. And it's difficult. And it makes me think, and we hear it on the phones, that ground floor, even toilet to start off with, and shower, just makes this house set up for people much longer than 5 years, it's 20 years, because they know that their grandparents can move in, their mother-in-law can move in, they can get older in that house.
Exactly. It's future-proofing.
Exactly. That's the word I was looking for, future-proofing.
Yes.
So some things to think about there.
Yeah, lots to think about with value adds. But yes, so just kind of to summarize what we've discussed so far, essentially, how do we prepare the renovation? Where do we start? what are the important steps that shouldn't be missed? How do we find and vet the trustworthy builders? Why do planning applications get rejected, and how to get mine approved? How to get that realistic budget estimation from the start, and how to calculate the value that the extension would add to the property.
And we will be sending this recording out after the show. So any questions you have, if you want this recording to be sent to your email address after the show, so just let us know if you need it. Exactly,
but now we have time for some questions.
The fun bit.
So we'll go through the Q&A that that people have been asking questions on throughout the webinar. If you do have any more, please do pop them in now.
Okay, so let's go from the top. Nick Weird, I've heard the right of precedence no longer applies to extensions. If your neighbor has built a large extension, that doesn't necessarily mean you will be able to. This is interesting, and it kind of depends on the application they've used, because there's an application called the larger home extensions, and that actually does require neighbors approval, the neighbors of the extender's approval. So it does depend. So if you look around and you see multiple precedents, if you see multiple schemes which are done as you expected, it's a really good indication. But the fallback always is the planner's SPD guidance, which is available online if you need to double check. So you're absolutely right, Nick. There's a bit of a gray area, but if you see a lot of them, it's a really good indication. And again, our team who you'll speak to here at Resi are amazing at looking at Google Maps, checking the SPD guidance, and giving you a pretty quick answer if it's going to be approved or refused. And Nick Verknock, can you add value without increasing square footage? We're about to buy a fully extended property, but with a suboptimal layout, e.g. kitchen in the middle of the house, loft conversion without a dormer. If we improve those aspects, could this increase the value, or would we be simply investing to make the property nicer to live in? It's a very interesting question, and this is quite site specific. And my advice here is, if it's just internal renovations, I would be engaging with maybe some builders about what the sort of estimated cost will be. And if you really then want to know, I would speak to Foxtons, speak to any of these big estate agents, ask them to let you know how much the value add would be, and all of a sudden you will have a really good indication if it's worth it. I always think it is worth it, because I think good design it may break even in year one, but if you hold on to the property, it really will hold its value.
All right, Deborah Taylor, I have architecture plans for a refurbishment, but it is too expensive. So what I would prefer to do is minimize the building work and concentrate more on complete refurbishment. New kitchen, bathrooms, heating, flooring, etc. But I don't know how to do it. Builders just want to build. Interior designers are too expensive and don't seem coordinated. Is this something Resi could do? So I only have to deal with one company / person. Great question, Deborah. What I would recommend for you is if you book in for one of our advice calls, which you can do through the Resi website, or the link will be sent out after this call as well. Myself or one of my colleagues, one of my other consultants, we can do some research on your property for you and let you know exactly how we can help. Yeah,
but absolutely great question. And Resi, one of Resi's great things is to manage this all under one roof. So we can help you with the designs, with the recoordination of the layouts, and introduce you to the right builders. And if there is any structural work, the structural engineers as well. So that one umbrella is what we're best at. Bala, do the same principles apply to mixed dwellings if planning to extend a flat roof above a shop? Thanks. So mixed dwellings, if it's a flat, you don't, permitted development doesn't count. So with permitted development, if it's a listed building or a conservation area or a flat, or the council have restricted that advice, you can't use permitted development. So mixed dwellings, absolutely, there's a route through with planning. There's lots we can do. So again, my recommendation to you is give us a call, give us an email, and we will, once we have the details of your flat, the details of what you're doing, we'll know very, very quickly how we can help you. Yeah, we can essentially do a bit of a feasibility study for you, look at the precedents on your behalf, and help you to understand what is realistic. And Richard, great question. I mentioned the 25% in London. This is driven by London is more expensive, and it's more expensive because the salaries are higher, the congestion charge, people are having to bring the builders in. It becomes a much more, there's more cost associated around it. So this all just ramps up and it becomes a more expensive sort of construction cost. So we've built, the builders who we introduce our clients to have built projects across the UK. So we've seen that there disparity with London a bit more expensive than outside of London.
How our Connect process works as well is that once you are ready to be introduced to contractors, we will specifically reach out to those who are appropriate for your project, whether that's location-wise, budget-wise, speed of delivery. You know, as with any industry as well, you can usually pay for a premium speed. So yeah, that's the purpose of our Connect team.
Great. Next one's anonymous. How can you verify these awards or accreditations? Because anyone can put a 4x5 image trust mark on the website. You're absolutely right. And I would go direct. If it's there on the tender or on the website, go then to the Trustmark website. Go to the Federation of Master Builders website, and that's where you double check it. And we were speaking to the Federation of Master Builders just last week up in Birmingham, and they have all these details. They have the list of builders, so it's a very, very quick double check on their website.
All right, Julia Campisi. We are viewing flats with lofts, as we could be interested in converting the loft to a bedroom/bathroom. Is it important to see the size of the loft on the floor plan when in the process of buying a flat? Could the dimension of the existing loft affect this loft conversion? Really good question, Julia. So the short answer is the existing loft space will affect feasibility of your project. You're going to need generally at minimum 2.2 meters of head height in that loft. So what that means is from the lowest part of the ground to the highest part of the ceiling to do a loft conversion. If you don't have that head height, it may still be feasible. You may have to either raise the roof or lower the floors. This is going to be something that is case by case, depending on the structure of the property. But yeah, definitely inquire around the head height of the loft. That is something that you will need to know from the start in terms of feasibility. Yeah,
I literally couldn't have said it better myself, Heather. And a bit of advice here. If you can't get into that loft with a tape measure, double check it. And if you're seeing 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 meters,
you're in the clear.
You're flying.
Yeah.
And if you're not, if it's lower, I would first of all check your neighbors. If you do have neighbors, I'm not sure of the context, check your neighbors. If they have done a loft extension, it's a pretty good indication again. Mm-hmm. But there is other ways. Some councils like you raising the ridge, some councils don't. But you can also lower the floor of your loft. But something to bear in mind, if you need to lower the floor of your loft, you're creating a lot of disruption in the first floor, in the bedrooms in the first floor. I've seen it maybe 1 in 50 projects that they do it, but in short, you've got options. And again, speak to us. Heather and her team are fantastic at analyzing these sites very quickly and letting you know what the options are.
Exactly. Another anonymous question. Do you need planning permission if your works fall under permitted development? Great question. So you do not need planning permission. What we highly recommend is that you apply for what's called a certificate of lawfulness. And this is where we take your proposed designs, submit them to the authority for the certificate, which is confirmation that the work falls within permitted development. This is not a legal requirement for you to do before proceeding with your build, but we highly recommend because it just protects that investment. If anything were to happen during the build, you have confirmation it's lawful. If you were to ever sell the property one day, any purchaser is going to want to see that it was a lawful project. It costs around £100 to £200 dependent, and yeah, definitely worth that investment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Next question from Anonymous. How about blocking sunlight? I'm not sure what that means.
I imagine in regards to bulk of an extension, being mindful of the neighbours, and yeah, right to light is something that the councils do consider. Yeah, we do need to make sure that the neighbours still have that right to light, as with their right to privacy. Yeah.
Okay, Nick, an architect recommended to me going down a D&B route with a contractor as a cheaper way of delivering a renovation when compared to going on a traditional route, design appointed contractor build route. Would you advise against that then when you get the technical design done first? Honestly, I really value the sort of keeping the expertise of your design and building regulations separate to your builder. It means that you've got independent, trusted people doing these two different things, and it means that they're also challenging each other. It means that you're not having all your eggs in one basket. So there are some good D&B companies out there, but also my sort of gut is maybe a little bit less quality, maybe doing a bit quicker, but not for the right reasons. I really think that keeping them separate, it means both the builder will challenge us and we will challenge the builder.
I think there's inherently as well just a conflict of interest if the design is being done mindful of the build itself rather than of your best interest. And if a design and build has quoted you for the work up front, they're then locked into that, which means it may not be the best cost breakdown for you. So yeah, always recommend to separate the two if possible.
Great. Next question is, what is JCT? Okay, sorry for giving you that lingo. It's basically joints, contracts, tribunal contracts. In short, it's a standard form of contract across the whole industry. So it's if you said JCT to anybody in the industry, they'd be like, great. And there's different sizes for different projects. So you have minor works for small projects up to about £250,000. You've got intermediate for like 500k to about that range. Then you've got the standard contract, which is about £1 million plus. So you have a different size of contract per project. And in that contract, you put in your details, their details. You put in the payment plans, you put in the reference, the drawings, and it basically this contract locks in yourself and the builder to a really robust process.
All right, next question, anonymous attendee. I'm looking to buy a below market value Victorian house that has poor flow. Can Resi help with the interior spatial planning? Short answer, yes. If you are reconfiguring your property, creating that open plan design that we just discussed, yeah, that's something we can help with.
It's bread and butter.
It's our bread and butter. Yeah, please speak to us. We'll let you know how we can help, show you what a process looks like, and yeah, can provide you with a quote for the Resi work.
Right, a garage conversion was done on the property we purchased. There's no building certificate for it and was done before the previous owners bought in 2001. We want to go through regularization and move our kitchen to the garage conversion. We don't know if it's possible to do when we don't have any information on the conversion. What would you suggest we do? Very interesting question. And whenever we start a process which doesn't have that technical information on like the garage, first of all, rest assured, if it's been there since 2001, it's in pretty good shape. As long as there's no cracks or subsidence, it sounds like it's robust without actually seeing it. And what a builder will typically do, or the building control inspector, whenever you get the site, they'll ask you to excavate around the foundations. So they'll basically dig some trenches around your building. And if them foundations are 1 meter, fantastic. If they're like 200 millimeters, there's a concern and there's cost there. So they'll expose the foundations. They'll also expose the floor to make sure if it's concrete, fantastic. If it's timber, the right size. And they'll probably ask you to expose some joists as well. So that information, again, once you get into the process, this happens a lot. So the building control inspectors and builders are prepared to do the extra checks. It may cost you a bit of money, maybe a couple £100 to do the tests. You will then know that it's in good shape. But rest assured, if it's been there for 20 years, I'm not as concerned about it, but would still recommend you checking.
Absolutely. When you say a really good ensuite on a master bedroom, what would you prioritize? Probably this one to you.
Honestly, it's like, I've seen a lot where we have turned walk-in cupboards into an ensuite, or we've turned in, you have 2 bedrooms side by side, and the wall between them, we put an ensuite there. So there's different ways of doing it. And the good thing is you don't necessarily need a window. I know it's good for odors, but you don't necessarily need it. But it's about, you need about 1 meter by like 2 meters, 2.5 meters space, just to get in there, a shower, a sink, and a toilet. Honestly, it may cost you 2, 3, 4 grand, but it will get them potential buyers over the line. And for you personally, it could be a fantastic space.
Right, James, how much would a party wall survey cost? Or really difficult question.
Yes, agreed.
Party wall, you can technically serve it yourself, and it doesn't have to cost you anything if the neighbors sign off. Fantastic. On the flip side, if they do really push back, and as Mark said earlier, if you have maybe 3, 4 party walls, it can cost potentially thousands sometimes. So it's quite case by case. Again, this is why we say speak to the neighbors early on, get an understanding of what they're likely to respond with, and you can help to kind of understand what those costs may look like there.
Yeah, and again, we have some really fantastic party wall surveyors. We've been working with them for about 6, 7 years. and they've helped our clients through some tricky situations. So again, it's all about control here, making sure it doesn't get out of control. Your neighbors can't stop you, but they can make it difficult. So it's about getting that sorted early. And it can be hundreds of pounds, but unfortunately it can be thousands in that then 10-20% of situations.
Yeah, they can't reasonably withhold consent, and
Exactly.
reasonable to one person can be quite different to someone else.
Exactly.
So
Katie, do you think materials prices are likely to stabilize or come down in the next 12 months? It's a really fantastic question. And honestly, they are going up and down. And I think timber peaked about a year and a half ago and it's a much better place now. So it's really hard to say. I don't see any major spikes coming down the road. I feel like we've seen that with the after COVID and the impact of Ukraine. So I hope it's with or below inflation for the next few months.
if only we had a crystal ball, though, right?
Yes.
No one can really know.
Yeah, Katie, it's a very interesting question to ask, but yeah, I hope not, but it's really hard to say. And I'd be keep inflation in mind for these discussions. And actually, if you go into inflation is this quite big number, but if you actually go into whoever sets inflation is the government or this independent body, they actually break it down into more detailed sections, and you can see in there like construction costs. So check the inflation metrics.
All right. You mentioned that you work with ex-planners. Do your team just cover London councils, please? So the ex-planners that we refer to was our in-house Resi planning team. So they are all planners, they are ex-case officers. They support us with design through any project in England. It's not bespoke just to London authorities. Their backgrounds is just that they used to work for the council, but they now are part of the Resi planning team. Yeah,
and they're fantastic. And on London, we have planning applications across the UK. So it's every borough in London and across literally every corner of the UK. So, and we've spoken to them all. So it's really, we really have that experience across everywhere. Francois de Rocourt, we don't get on with our neighbours. They're late 80, widows on each side of our terrace house. Any risk? There is always risk with neighbours. There really is. It's really hard to sort of quantify how risky it is. My recommendation is be considered in your design. Make sure your design is considering how your neighbours use their house. Like it's really important that you aren't too confrontational in that respect. And if you can, anything you can do to sort of extend this gesture of goodwill, it really will help you. And they will get notified, whatever happens. They will get notified in some way or the other. So getting it in there early, it may be feel difficult now, but it really is worth it.
Again, they can't reasonably withhold consent to any process. So
Fang Zhao, can I do the extension, which is not exactly the same for planning permission approved? Can I rectify afterwards?
Depends what you mean by not exactly the same as the planning permission approved. You can't do a 5-meter extension when you had a 3-meter approved. If you're making changes internally, then possibly. It's very much design dependent.
Yeah, and there is a rectification process. So if you do build bigger, there is a way you can make it lawful, but it's very risky and it's not guaranteed. So recommendations is always stick to what you've been approved. Don't change that. If you do change it, there are ways you can do that quickly with the council. So speak to us and we can help you before you do it. And it just becomes a much more difficult thing if you do try and change it.
All right, Thomas, do you have a structural engineer? So any third party outside of the architectural remit, such as a structural engineer, such as a approved inspector, drainage surveyor, we can introduce you to them through our Connect service. We will facilitate any communication that's required with them between ourselves as the architect and the structural engineer designs. That's all part of our Resi service. So in short, we don't have structural engineers working in-house, but we have a large network of them who we can support with. Next question, is it correct that Resi only serves customers in Greater London but not elsewhere? Nope, that's not true. We can help you with your project nationwide. Yeah,
the next one's quite detailed. So if a party or surveyor makes unreasonable demands, thereby dragging out the matter and racking up costs, what can you do without racking up excessive costs from the third surveyor? Can you ask for a detailed timesheet? Party wall agreements are often straightforward for surveyors. This is sounds a bit complex. And first of all, you're absolutely right. any party wall surveyor, you can refer to a third surveyor, which would then act as an intermediate between the surveyors. I think with these guys, you always want to make sure you're having proactive conversations. Timesheets, in theory, it depends on your fee proposal. If your fee is a fixed fee, it doesn't really matter. But if there is variable and they're charging you by the hour, absolutely, timesheets, get that in there. And party walls, sometimes they may seem straightforward, but they're not. So I think it's case by case, but timesheets by all means if you want to, and yeah, just see what you can do there.
All right, maybe we do one more question and then we do have to wrap up. Where were you at?
Yep.
Glenys, is it advisable to use a double glazing company such as Everest or Bristolete to organize your kitchen extension / conservatory? If you are doing a kitchen extension, I definitely recommend engaging an architect to help. Yes. Glazing company. Yes, a double glazing company most likely does not have the sort of authority or background to design a full kitchen extension for you, support you with planning, support you with building regulations. When it comes to extending on your property, investment upfront is what's going to protect you in the long run. So yeah, I would recommend working with an architect for an extension. Absolutely.
Great. Okay, that's it. That's where we are. I appreciate there are some more questions in there. So my recommendation is for everyone who has more questions, just give us a call or go to our website and book it in. And yeah, thank you very much for your time today.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. It's been great to speak to you.
Yes, and I know renovation, it can feel overwhelming and it can feel very hard, but I really, really hope after this discussion, maybe it doesn't feel as overwhelming. Maybe it doesn't feel as hard as you may have thought about 1 hour ago. And like I say, we've done this thousands of times. We have a really fantastic team of experts, planning, design, building regulations in-house. So please book an advice call or check out our website at resi.co.uk and see how we can help you. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, everyone. All right. Bye.
Cheers.